My name is Helen. I was sitting beside my 5-year-old grandson Max at my son Ethan's second wedding. The celebration was staged with a kind of beauty meant to impress strangers but not to comfort family. An old estate near Boston, all high windows and marble floors, the air thick with expensive perfume and the metallic bite of champagne. Candles glowed from silver candelabras, each flame flickering as if it knew the truth behind the illusion. White roses, imported, no doubt, stood in tall vases at every table, so perfect they looked plastic. Even the music, live jazz drifting through the hall, felt curated, artificial, as if no one trusted real joy to carry the evening. I should have been happy. My only son, handsome in his tailored suit, was beginning again, a bride radiant at his side. Guests toasted with sparkling laughter. The air buzzed with congratulations. But for me, happiness had long become a fragile thing, a glass too easily shattered. I watched Max instead. His world was still innocent, his hands too small, his trust too large. He sat beside me in his miniature navy jacket, the sleeves a little long, his hair stubbornly untidy no matter how many times his father smoothed it down. He ignored the speeches, the flash of cameras. All he cared about was the little red toy car he carried everywhere. He rolled it across the linen tablecloth, the wheels making a faint squeak, his concentration fierce in the way only children can manage. Sometimes he whispered to it, as though it were alive, as though the car itself understood him better than any of us. That small ritual comforted me. Amidst the sea of strangers, the boy was my anchor. Then, without warning, his hand froze mid-roll. The car teetered at the edge of the table. He turned to me, his eyes wide, not playful, not curious, but frightened. His little fingers clutched my hand so tightly that my bones ached. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice thin as thread. "Leave. Right now." At first I thought he was overwhelmed by the noise, the towering floral arrangements, the plates of food he couldn't eat. He had always been sensitive. But something in his whisper struck deeper. His breath was shaky, his lips trembling against my arm. I bent down to comfort him, and then I saw it. Beneath the table, taped against the dark polished wood where no eye should wander, gleamed the cold reflection of plastic. A sliver of black. A tiny circular lens staring back at me. A hidden camera. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My heart slammed against my ribs as if trying to warn me, trying to drag me out of the room. Then I saw the other thing. A folded scrap of paper tucked beside the tape, edges ragged as though torn in haste. I reached for it with trembling fingers. My hand shook so badly I feared I'd drop it, feared someone was already watching me through that camera, waiting. I unfolded the note under the tablecloth, my pulse roaring louder than the music. The handwriting was hurried, sharp, slanted. Not meant for beauty, only for efficiency. Table 6. Add shrimp to the child's serving. For a second the words blurred. My eyes refused to believe them. Then the meaning struck like a knife. Shrimp. Max. My grandson had a life-threatening allergy. Even the smallest trace could close his throat, could steal the air from his lungs before help arrived. We carried epinephrine injectors everywhere. Drilled every waiter, every teacher, every babysitter. His survival depended on vigilance. And here, at this glittering celebration of love and family, was an instruction, cold, deliberate, to lace his food with poison. The hall spun around me. The music distorted into meaningless noise. Laughter stretched into a cruel echo. My world shrank to 3 things only: the boy beside me, the slip of paper in my hand, and the rising terror that someone in this very room of smiling faces and raised glasses, wanted him gone. I lifted my head slowly, scanning the tables. The bridesmaids were laughing at something on a phone. Ethan stood with Kelly, his new wife, accepting congratulations, her hand glittering with a diamond I suspected she had chosen herself. A waiter passed with a silver tray of shrimp cocktails, the pink curve of the shellfish glistening under candlelight. My throat closed. The paper crumpled in my fist. Max pressed against me, sensing the storm inside my chest. His voice was barely audible, but it carried all the weight of instinct children sometimes have. "Grandma," he repeated, eyes fixed on mine. "Let's go." For years I had been the steady one, through sickness, through loss, through Ethan's first collapse of a marriage. I had thought I knew betrayal already. But this was different. This wasn't heartbreak. It was attempted murder. written in hurried ink. I glanced at the note again, willing it to change, to dissolve, to reveal itself as some misunderstanding. But it remained the same. Sharp letters, lethal instruction. The camera under the table watched silently, a mechanical witness to malice. And suddenly, the opulence of the hall seemed grotesque. The silverware too sharp, the roses too white, the candles flickering like funeral lights. The faces around me blurred into masks, each one capable of cruelty, each smile hiding the possibility of intent. Who had written it? Who had placed it? Who, in this hall of music and vows, wanted a child's coffin instead of a wedding dance? I tightened my hold on Max. His small chest rose and fell quickly, his toy car trapped between us, its red paint glinting faintly in the candlelight. I had never been more afraid in my life. And I had never been more certain. This night, meant to celebrate love, had turned into a battlefield. The paper burned in my hand long after I slipped it into my clutch. I couldn't eat, couldn't drink, couldn't even hear the music anymore. Every time I glanced at Max, my pulse rattled. His small body swayed with sleepiness, his toy car still clutched like a lifeline. I pressed a hand to his back, steady, protective, while inside my chest a storm howled. And in that storm, without warning, a memory surfaced. A softer time. A different woman. Ethan's first wife, Grace. Her name fit her perfectly. She was gentle without being weak, firm without being harsh. I used to say she moved like candlelight. Steady, warm, glowing even in shadows. She never entered a room to conquer it, only to soften it. Her laugh was quiet but had a way of carrying, of brightening corners where silence had sat too long. I remembered one night as if it were stitched into my bones. Max was barely 2. Fever had taken hold of him. Fierce, unrelenting. His small body burned so hot I feared he might burst into flame. Ethan had paced the floor, useless, his hands shaking too badly to measure medicine. He was always like that, too much heart, too little control. It was Grace and I who sat by the crib through the long hours. She dipped the cloth into cool water, wrung it out, pressed it gently to Max's forehead. I took it from her when her hands grew tired. We passed that small square of cotton back and forth like monks with holy relics, whispering to each other to stay awake. I remember the curve of her back as she leaned over Max, her hair falling across her face. "He'll be fine," she whispered, though her voice trembled. I touched her shoulder and whispered back, "He has you. That's why." By dawn the fever broke. Max lay damp with sweat but breathing evenly. Grace leaned her head against my arm and closed her eyes for a moment, a soldier resting after battle. I loved her in that instant more than I had loved anyone outside my own blood. She wasn't just Ethan's wife. She was my daughter in all but name. But fate has a cruelty of its own. I still remember the phone call. Rain against the windows, the taste of tea gone cold. And then the words that split me open. Truck accident. A storm-slicked highway. A driver who should have stopped but didn't. At the funeral, the world itself seemed drowned. The rain came down like punishment, relentless. Ethan collapsed against the coffin, his sobs so violent I thought he might break apart. And Max, my sweet boy, stood by in a little black suit, 4 years old, holding my hand, whispering, "Where's Mommy?" How do you answer that? How do you tell a child that the woman who kissed his bruises and sang him to sleep is never coming back? I could only hold him tighter, my tears mixing with the rain. After Grace's death, laughter vanished from our house like a ghost finally released. Ethan buried himself in work. His hours stretched into nights, his eyes red, his words curt. He said it was the only way to keep going, but I knew it was avoidance. He couldn't bear the silence Grace had left behind. And Max, my little sparrow, grew quiet. Too quiet. He stopped running through the yard with toy planes. He stopped asking for bedtime stories. He sat by the window with his toy car, pushing it slowly across the sill, as if motion itself might fill the void. That was when I took it upon myself to keep Grace alive. Night after night, when Max's small body curled under the blankets, I told him stories. Not fairy tales but memories. Once, when you were very small, your mommy sang you to sleep in the kitchen. She used a spoon as a microphone and twirled you until you laughed so hard she had to sit on the floor. His eyes would brighten just for a second, as if she might walk back through the door. Sometimes he'd whisper, "Tell me more, Grandma. Tell me about her hands." And I'd describe the way she tied his shoes, brushed his hair, painted little animals on his sandwich napkins. In our house where silence reigned, I spoke Grace's love like scripture, so it would never vanish. But silence still pressed in. Ethan's absence deepened. He left early, returned late, and when he was home, he was a shadow, eating without tasting, nodding without hearing. He kissed Max on the head out of duty, not warmth. I wanted to shake him, scream at him that his son needed him, but grief had made him untouchable. So I became both mother and grandmother. I was the one who noticed when Max outgrew his shoes, the one who stayed awake when fever struck again, the one who taught him to ride a bike, steadying the seat while he pedaled furiously, believing my hand was still there long after I had let go. But every time his small voice asked, "Grandma, where's Mommy?" a knife turned again. Grace's absence wasn't just a wound. It was an open canyon across our lives. I can still see that day years ago now, when Max found Grace's photograph in the drawer. He carried it to me, his little fingers smudging the glass. "She's pretty," he whispered, almost shy. I pulled him into my lap and kissed his hair, holding the frame so both of us could look. "Yes, sweetheart. She was the most beautiful thing in this world. And she loved you more than life." He pressed the photograph to his chest and whispered, "I miss her." That whisper never left me. It became my prayer, my vow. To make sure her love was not erased, even if Ethan buried himself in boardrooms and Kelly, the new wife, tried to bury her memory with roses and rehearsed smiles. And sitting in that wedding hall, clutching the poisonous note in my hand, I realized, if Grace had been alive, none of this would have happened. Grace would never have let danger creep near her child. She would have seen through the candles, through the roses, through the shimmering lies. I felt her absence sharper than ever. Not just as my lost daughter, but as Max's shield. She was the kind of woman who would have thrown herself between him and any harm. Now that duty was mine alone. The jazz music swelled. Glasses clinked. Ethan laughed at something Kelly whispered in his ear, his smile bright and oblivious. He didn't notice his son pressed close to me, trembling. He didn't see the paper clenched in my fist. But I did. And I thought of Grace. The cloths dipped in water, the whispered lullabies, the rain-soaked coffin. Her love lived in me now. And I swore, right there beneath the glittering chandeliers, that nothing, not even Ethan's blindness, not even Kelly's charm, not even the hidden malice of a note slipped under a table, would take Max from me. Grace had passed the torch without knowing. And I would burn anyone who tried to extinguish it. Grief had reshaped our house into something unfamiliar. Not broken exactly, but hollowed. Ethan's work filled the silence with his absence. I filled it with duty. But there was another presence, steady and quiet, who began to weave threads of warmth back into our lives. Jenna. Jenna was not my blood. She was the daughter I had chosen years ago, when I signed the papers that turned a lonely girl from the foster system into my family. She was 15 then, sharp-eyed, wary, already carrying too many scars. Her voice was soft, her laughter rare. But I saw in her something unbreakable, a spine of quiet steel. When Grace died, Jenna was 21. She could have left. She could have said, "This isn't my burden." But she didn't. She stayed, not with speeches or declarations, but with presence. Like a stone in the river, unmoving, grounding, easy to overlook until you realized you were leaning on it. I remember one of those first nights after the funeral. Ethan had disappeared into his office at the firm, unreachable. I was in the kitchen, hands trembling over a pot of soup that had boiled too long. Max sat at the table, refusing to eat, staring at nothing. I felt helpless, unable to summon the right words, when Jenna appeared in the doorway. She set down a plate of cookies, uneven, slightly burnt, and slid one in front of Max. "Try this," she said simply, nudging it toward him. He looked at her with eyes too old for his years. "I don't want it." "That's fine," she said, sitting beside him. "I'll eat it. But you should draw me something while I do." She slid a coloring book and some crayons onto the table. Max blinked at her, suspicious, then hesitantly picked up a blue crayon. Within minutes he was scribbling crooked cars across the page. Jenna smiled, biting into her burnt cookie as if it were the best thing she'd ever tasted. And for the first time in weeks, Max's shoulders loosened. That was Jenna's gift. Not grand gestures, not loud reassurances, but small acts of patience that created space for healing. Over the months, she became the rhythm of our home. She organized homework into neat stacks on the kitchen table. She slipped little notes into Max's lunchbox, crooked smiley faces, stick figure drawings of kites and sparrows. She set timers for dinner, insisting we eat together even when Ethan called to say he'd be late. I watched her one afternoon in the yard. The wind was strong, tossing the last of autumn's leaves across the grass. Jenna held a paper kite she had helped Max build from newspaper and string. She guided him, steadying the spool, until the fragile creation caught the wind and soared. Max's laughter broke free, sudden, bright, startling in its sweetness. Jenna laughed too, tilting her head back to watch the kite dance against the gray sky. In that moment I saw it clearly. She was giving him back what grief had stolen. But I also saw something else. When Ethan arrived home that evening, tired but still handsome, Jenna's gaze lingered on him longer than it should have. It wasn't childish admiration anymore. It wasn't the affection of a younger sister. It was something unspoken, heavier, dangerous. I pretended not to notice. What right did I have to question her heart, when she had given so much of it already? Still, I stored the observation like a thorn in my chest. Ethan never seemed to notice. He was consumed by work, by ambition, by the endless climb toward some ill-defined summit. He came home late, loosened his tie, kissed Max quickly, and buried himself in his laptop. When Jenna slid him a plate of food, he accepted it absently, barely looking at her. And yet, I saw her eyes soften each time. I saw her shoulders straighten, her hands linger just a second too long on the edge of the plate. She loved quietly, just as she lived quietly. The house itself changed under her care. The sharpness of grief dulled into routine, the hollow corners filled with small comforts, the smell of baking bread, the sound of crayons scratching across paper, the hum of Jenna's soft voice reading bedtime stories. She never tried to replace Grace. She never claimed titles or demanded recognition. She simply anchored us, binding loose ends before the whole structure unraveled. One winter evening, Max developed another fever. Ethan was away on business, unreachable. I sat at his bedside with medicine and cloths, heart clenched. Jenna entered silently, carrying a small bowl of ice cubes wrapped in a towel. She pressed it gently against his skin, whispering stories about brave knights who never gave up. He clung to her voice as much as to the coolness of the compress. Later, when Max finally fell asleep, I found Jenna in the kitchen rinsing the towel. Her face was pale, tired, but her hands moved with calm precision. "You don't have to carry all this," I told her softly. She shrugged. "He needs it. And so do you." I wanted to hug her, to thank her for saving us both, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I squeezed her shoulder, and she smiled faintly as if she already knew. Years blurred into routines. Birthdays, school plays, scraped knees, quiet dinners. Ethan remained a ghost more often than not. But the flame in our house, dim, flickering, stubborn, stayed alive because Jenna kept feeding it. Still, the thorn remained. I saw her gaze shift when Ethan walked into the room. I heard the hesitation in her voice when he praised her cooking or thanked her for looking after Max. It was admiration shading into something deeper, more dangerous. And I wondered, was it inevitable? When a young woman dedicates her life to holding together a broken home, does her heart naturally seek out the one figure she cannot have? I said nothing. Silence was easier. But silence, I knew too well, has a way of growing teeth. Jenna didn't ask for recognition. She didn't boast of sacrifices. But I knew, better than anyone, that the family we still had was stitched together with her invisible thread. Without her, the house would have collapsed into grief. Without her, Ethan's absence would have turned Max into a shadow. Without her, I might have broken under the weight of my own sorrow. And so I watched her quietly, this daughter I had chosen, this anchor who held us steady, carrying more than she should, giving more than we deserved. And all the while, I prayed that her silent longing would not one day split us apart. It was on a late spring evening, when the first warmth of the season lingered in the air, that Ethan brought her home. I had been in the kitchen, folding laundry on the counter, the familiar weight of shirts and socks grounding me in the ordinary. Max sat at the table, rolling his toy car across the placemats, while Jenna stirred a pot of pasta sauce on the stove, humming softly under her breath. It was one of those evenings that felt fragile but whole. A quiet routine pieced together with care. Then the front door opened. Ethan's voice carried in brighter, sharper than usual. "Mom, Max, there's someone I want you to meet." And Kelly walked into our lives. She was dressed in light blue, the color chosen carefully, I realized later, soft enough to look approachable but elegant enough to command attention. Her hair fell in practice waves, each curl perfect. She moved with grace, but not the unthinking grace of someone natural. No, it was deliberate, rehearsed. Every gesture calibrated. Every smile controlled. "Mrs. Carter," she said warmly, stepping forward with her hand extended. "It's such an honor." Her palm was soft, too soft. Perfume clung to her skin, floral but sharp, as if it were designed to linger long after she left the room. I nodded, polite, hiding the unease that bloomed instantly. Something about her tone, smooth, practiced, felt like silk stretched over steel. Her gaze wandered quickly, cataloging the room. She paused at the mantel, where a photograph of Grace and baby Max sat in its silver frame. Kelly lingered a moment too long. Her smile faltered, only briefly, but enough for me to see it. A flicker of something cold, calculating, before she smoothed it back into perfection. At dinner she was flawless. She complimented Jenna's cooking, though I noticed she barely touched her plate. She praised the house, her eyes sweeping across the furniture I had chosen, the curtains I had sewn. She even offered to wash dishes afterward, rolling up her sleeves with the air of someone who wanted to prove she belonged. Ethan was radiant beside her, laughing easily, his shoulders lighter than they had been in years. He looked at her the way men look when they want to be seen as providers again, proud, hopeful, maybe even a little desperate. But not everyone was enchanted. Max sat stiffly, his toy car clutched in his hand, refusing to look at her. When she offered him a candy bar from her purse, he shook his head sharply. "No," he whispered, sliding closer to me. His eyes were wide, cautious, the same look he had worn when he found the hidden camera at the wedding years later. Children notice what adults ignore. Jenna too was quiet. She smiled politely, spoke when spoken to, but I saw the tension in her shoulders. When Kelly reached across the table and took Ethan's hand, Jenna's grip on her fork tightened. She lowered her eyes, but her silence was heavy, brimming with something unspoken. I told myself I was being unfair. Ethan deserved happiness. He had walked through fire and come out scarred. Why shouldn't he find someone new? Grace was gone. Her light could not return. Wasn't it selfish to guard his heart like a relic, to imagine no one else could hold it? And yet doubt stayed sharp as a thorn lodged under skin. There were small things too subtle for Ethan to see. The way Kelly leaned too close when he spoke, nodding with exaggerated attentiveness. The way her compliments came in strings too polished, as if she had rehearsed them before arriving. The way her eyes darted across Jenna when Ethan laughed, measuring, assessing. After dinner, as Max and Jenna cleared the table, Kelly lingered beside me in the kitchen. "You've built a beautiful family," she said softly, her eyes sweeping the photographs pinned to the fridge, birthdays, school plays, messy smiles. "I hope I can add to it." The words should have comforted me. Instead they chilled. She said add to it the way someone might speak of acquiring an estate, absorbing it into her possession. That night, after she left, Ethan was almost giddy. He poured himself a rare glass of wine, leaned back in his chair and smiled. "What do you think of her, Mom? Isn't she wonderful?" I forced a smile. "She's very polished." He laughed. "She's perfect. You'll see. She understands me. She makes me feel alive again." I bit back my doubts. Who was I to crush his fragile joy? But deep inside I knew perfection is never natural. Perfection is a mask. The days that followed confirmed it. Kelly appeared often, always with that same practiced smile. She brought small gifts, flowers, wine, chocolates, leaving them on the counter as if marking territory. She leaned into conversations with Ethan, her hand brushing his arm lightly, casually, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. With Max, her efforts were clumsy. She invited him to parks, bought him ice cream, reported cheerfully afterward that they had bonded. But he returned home silent, his shirt stained, his toy car clutched tight. One evening I overheard her in the kitchen, her voice sharp. "Don't make a mess. Act your age." Seconds later, when I stepped in, her tone flipped, sugar sweet. Max shrank behind me. She smiled. Jenna remained watchful, her eyes tracking every gesture. She didn't confront, didn't argue, but I could feel her unease like a current under the floorboards. I told myself again I was imagining things, but the thorn remained. And sometimes when the house was quiet and the lights dimmed, I would catch myself picturing Grace. Grace, who had never needed to practice warmth, who never looked at photographs of others with calculation, who never made my grandson recoil. Kelly was beautiful, polished, gracious. But her smile was the kind that practiced in mirrors, not born from love but from ambition. And though I stayed silent, I knew the mask would one day slip. At first, Kelly's presence settled over our lives like a polished veneer. Smooth, flawless, and fragile. Ethan floated in her orbit, distracted and glowing, as though her very attention validated him. To the guests who passed through our house, she was immaculate. The charming fiancé who asked after their health, poured wine with grace, and made laughter sound effortless. But I saw the other side. Not immediately, not in grand betrayals, but in small fractures, cracks hairline thin, easy to overlook if you wanted peace. She began with Max. Children, after all, are the easiest to dismiss. She paraded outings like trophies. Parks, ice cream shops, cheerful photographs posted on her phone. "We had so much fun," she'd declare when she returned him, her lipstick smile shining. But when the door closed, Max was silent. His shirt bore stains she hadn't bothered to wipe, his hair uncombed, his toy car clenched tighter than ever. One afternoon, I lingered in the hallway while she thought herself unseen. Her voice sliced through the kitchen air, sharp and cold. "Don't make a mess. Act your age." The words carried the venom of disdain, not guidance. Then, as soon as my foot crossed the threshold, her tone flipped, sugar-sweet, affectionate, as though the cruelty had never been spoken. Max stared at the floor, his silence louder than any accusation. I wanted to confront her, but Ethan's happiness chained me. He was working long hours, yes, but he came home lighter, smiling more than he had in years. To wound Kelly was to wound him, and I could not bring myself to add weight to his already burdened shoulders. The signs multiplied. At Max's birthday, Jenna spent 2 evenings baking a cake from scratch, decorating it with tiny cars and bright frosting. When Max saw it, his whole face lit with wonder. He clapped his hands, laughing, his joy raw and unguarded. Kelly, standing just behind him, offered a flat happy birthday and a limp pat on his shoulder. No warmth, no delight, only a performance for appearance's sake. She gave him a wrapped box, an expensive toy car track. But Max ignored it, clinging instead to Jenna's homemade cake as if it were treasure. Later, when the candles were blown out and laughter echoed, I caught Kelly's expression. Not disappointment but irritation. As though the child's love had failed to align with her investment. Another day in the supermarket, I trailed behind them in the next aisle. She thought no one heard. "Why do you always drag that car around?" she hissed at Max, her tone laced with scorn. "You look ridiculous." His small shoulders hunched. She turned the corner, and by the time I caught up, her voice was light again. "Oh, Max just adores his toys," she told a passing acquaintance. That evening as we drove home, Max whispered in the back seat, "Grandma, I don't want to go back with Miss Kelly." His words were faint, trembling, as if he feared punishment for speaking them. I smoothed his hair, forcing a steady tone. "You're safe with me." But inside, dread coiled tighter. Even his teacher noticed. She called one afternoon, her voice gentle but concerned. "Helen, I'm worried. Max has been very withdrawn lately. Quiet, distracted. He used to raise his hand in class, tell stories about his grandma. Now he just shrinks." I thanked her, my throat thick, and hung up before my voice cracked. When I shared my concern with Ethan, his face hardened. "Mom, she's trying. You know how hard it is to step into this role. Give her time." Time. That was always his answer. As if cruelty softened with patience, as if indifference ripened into love. And still I excused. For Ethan's sake. For the illusion of stability. Kelly herself grew bolder. She filled the house with her things. A sweater draped on the couch, bottles of perfume crowding the bathroom sink. She organized Ethan's papers, claiming efficiency, but I noticed the way she studied every document before setting it aside. One evening I walked past the living room and saw her flipping through a photo album of Grace and Ethan. She lingered on the pictures of Grace holding Max, her fingers tracing the images before she shut the book abruptly and slid it back with a forced smile. Jenna stiffened around her. The polite silences grew heavier, the distance sharper. At dinner, Kelly would touch Ethan's hand lightly while speaking, and I would see Jenna's jaw tighten, her fork press harder into her plate. She said nothing, but her silence carried a storm. And still I excused, because admitting the truth, that Ethan's new beginning was rotting at the roots, felt too cruel, too final. I told myself Max would adapt, Jenna would adjust, Ethan would see. But excuses are brittle things. Each one cracks under its own weight, until you are left with nothing but fragments and the raw truth you tried to hide. And the truth was this. Kelly was no grace. She was not warmth or light. She was ice disguised as water, sharpness disguised as charm. And though I clung to denial, a part of me knew. One day the mask would shatter. The estate gleamed like a palace that morning, all stone archways and manicured gardens, the kind of place meant to photograph well and hide its chill. Boston sunlight poured through tall windows, laying golden stripes across polished floors. Staff scurried like stagehands perfecting illusions. Candles lit in synchronized rows, trays of champagne arranged for effortless reach, violins tuning to fill the silences guests never wanted to notice. I arrived early with Max, his small hand tight in mine. He wore the navy jacket again, sleeves still a little too long, his tie crooked despite my attempts to fix it. He carried his red toy car in his pocket like a talisman. Whenever nerves overtook him, he touched it, rolling its smooth edges between his fingers. I envied him that certainty. My own hands trembled around nothing. Guests gathered in clusters, their laughter echoing off marble. Everyone admired Kelly, radiant in lace and pearls, her smile dazzling, as if she had been born to inhabit this stage. She glided from one group to another, each laugh perfectly timed, each gesture designed to charm. Ethan beamed beside her, handsome in his suit, his happiness both genuine and blind. I wanted to be happy for him. I told myself I should be. He had endured loss, years of emptiness. Perhaps Kelly was his way back into life. Perhaps love could be remade, even if it no longer resembled what Grace had once given him. But my stomach twisted each time I caught her eye. Beneath the glow I sensed calculation, a hunger that no lace could soften. The hall was alive with sound. Clinking glasses, the murmur of gossip, the swish of dresses brushing the floor. Trays of shrimp circled the room, their scent sharp, cloying, dangerous. My eyes followed every one. Max's allergy was no secret, yet here the very thing that could kill him floated freely among us, glistening pink on silver spoons. I guided Max to our table, table 6. White roses towered in the centerpiece, candles flickering on mirrored glass. He sat beside me, quiet, his car in hand. Jenna slipped into the seat on his other side, her presence steady, a calm counterbalance. She leaned toward him with soft words, offering him a piece of bread instead of the shrimp-filled hors d'oeuvres the waiters pushed with smiles. Max nibbled, his shoulders loosening slightly. His car tumbled from the table and rolled to the floor. He ducked under the linen, chasing it. I bent down to help him, and then he froze. His small body went rigid, eyes locked on something beneath the table. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice sharp with fear. "Look." I followed his gaze and my breath stopped. There, taped under the edge of the table, was a black object. A tiny lens glinted in the candlelight, a hidden camera, and next to it, folded tight, a scrap of paper. My fingers shook as I peeled it free. I unfolded it beneath the cloth, my eyes scanning hurried letters. Table 6. Add shrimp to the child's serving. The word sliced through me. My throat closed. The hall blurred, sound collapsing into a hollow hum. Shrimp. Table 6. The child. Max. My hands clenched the note so hard it nearly tore. I glanced at the trays again, watched a waiter pass near, shrimp gleaming under chandeliers. My grandson's life hung in the balance of one careless plate, one malicious order. Max's hand clutched mine, his toy car pressed between our palms. "Grandma, let's go," he whispered again, trembling. I looked around the hall, at the guests laughing, at Ethan glowing, at Kelly radiant, and felt the ground tilt. Which smile masked cruelty? Which hand had written this order? Which soul among these elegantly dressed witnesses wanted to harm a child? The candles flickered harder, shadows dancing against stone walls. The violin swelled, but to me it sounded like a dirge. I drew Max close, my body shielding his, my eyes darting across every face. Suspicion gnawed at me. Each guessed a potential executioner cloaked in silk. Even the waiters, their trays gleaming with danger, seemed complicit. Ethan raised his glass across the room, beaming at me, oblivious. Kelly stood beside him, glowing for the cameras, a vision of perfection. Yet I thought of the way she looked at Grace's photograph, the flicker of coldness behind her practiced smile. The paper in my hand trembled. Evidence or madness? Who would believe me if I spoke? A grandmother trembling at shadows, or a woman who had uncovered a deliberate attempt at murder? But Max's small voice anchored me. His instinct had guided him under the table. His eyes had caught what mine would have missed. Children sense truth before adults do. And I would not dismiss him. I pressed a kiss to his hair, whispering, "You're safe. I won't let anything happen." Yet even as I said it, I felt terror coil tighter. For safety is never certain when betrayal hides among roses and candles. And so in that glittering hall with jazz and firelight, I realized, this wedding was not celebration. It was battlefield. And the first *T had already been fired. The note quivered in my fist long after I slipped it into my clutch. I could not still my hands. Every candle in the hall seemed suddenly too bright, every smile too sharp. I kept Max close, his small body pressed to mine, his toy car a hard lump between us. He looked up at me with wide eyes, silently begging me to protect him. The waiter nearest our table returned with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. He smiled politely, lowering the silver platter toward Max. Shrimp glistened under the lights. My stomach turned. I snapped my hand up between the tray and the boy. "No," I said, sharper than I intended. "Not for him." The waiter hesitated, blinking at me, then withdrew. The moment passed, but my heart kept hammering. It was not a mistake. Someone had meant for that shrimp to land on my grandson's plate. The paper was not a joke. It was an order. I rose quickly, whispering to Jenna to stay with Max. She nodded, her face pale but steady. In the hallway, away from the music and laughter, I cornered the first waiter I found. A young man with nervous eyes, carrying a stack of glasses toward the kitchen. My voice was low, urgent. "Did you write this?" I unfolded the crumpled note, thrusting it at him. He read it, and all color drained from his face. "Yes," he stammered. "But it wasn't my idea. A woman gave me the note and said it was important. I didn't even read it. I just wrote it again so I wouldn't forget the order." My blood ran cold. "What woman?" I don't know her name. She said it was a special request for the child at table 6. I thought," he stopped, swallowing hard. "I thought maybe he liked shrimp. Please ma'am, I didn't know he was allergic." His hands trembled. He was young, hardly older than Jenna, his panic genuine. I believed him. He was a pawn, not the mastermind. The band inside shifted songs, laughter swelled. The signal that dinner was about to be served. Panic clawed at my throat. In minutes, dishes would be placed in front of every guest. If the kitchen followed the note, Max's plate would already be poisoned. I moved quickly back into the hall, clutching the note like a wee *P***N. My pulse roared in my ears. Max spotted me instantly, relief flooding his small face. Jenna's hand rested protectively on his shoulder, her eyes scanning the room with suspicion. The head waiter began announcing the main course, his voice smooth, trained. Plates appeared in the hands of servers, rows of polished silver domes gliding toward the tables. I raised my hand. "A moment, please." The music faltered. Guests turned, murmurs rising. Ethan, startled, hurried toward me, his expression tightening. "Mom, what's wrong?" I held up the note with a trembling hand. My voice carried louder than I intended, slicing through the silence. "Who ordered shrimp for the child at table 6? The words dropped like stones into the glittering hall. Conversation stilled. Waiters froze. Guests blinked at each other, confused. Ethan reached me, took the note and scanned it. His face blanched, his jaw tightening. He looked up, eyes darting toward Max, then toward Kelly. His hand shook slightly as he passed the note back. This must be some mistake," he said, but his voice cracked. It wasn't a mistake. We both knew it. Around us, the illusion of joy fractured. Smiles faltered. Glasses lowered. People shifted uneasily in their chairs, whispering. Jenna stood, her posture rigid, her hand on Max's back. He clutched his toy car so tightly his knuckles whitened. I saw Kelly across the room, radiant still, but her smile frozen. Her eyes flicked toward us, then away, calculating. The air grew heavy, tense. The chandeliers flickered as though the building itself sensed the truth. I turned slowly, scanning the crowd, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Someone in this room tried to hurt a child. A ripple of gasps spread. The head waiter looked pale, his hands shaking. The young server I had cornered earlier stepped timidly forward from the shadows of the doorway, his face stricken. "It was me," he said, his voice cracking. I didn't write the first note. A woman gave it to me and asked me to make sure the child at table 6 received shrimp. I didn't know." He stopped, his throat tight with fear. All eyes swung toward him, then toward me, then toward Ethan. The polished surface of the evening had shattered. Behind every face lurked suspicion, fear, or guilt. Ethan took a step closer to me, lowering his voice, though I knew others could still hear. "Mom, are you sure about this? Maybe it's a misunderstanding." But I saw the paper tremble in his hand, the ash-white color of his face. He knew. At least part of him knew. The celebration, so carefully choreographed, had collapsed. Candles flickered in drafts from the shifting crowd. The violins stopped mid-note, bows hanging awkwardly in the air. Guests whispered fiercely, suspicion weaving through their words. And I stood there, Max at my side, the note in my hand, knowing the truth as clearly as the beat of my own heart. Someone had meant to K***l my grandson. The hall would never be the same. The note quivered in Ethan's hand, his fingers tight, the paper crumpling like a wounded bird. The room had gone silent, the kind of silence that hums louder than noise. Guests leaned forward, their pearls and cufflinks catching the candlelight, hungry for drama but pretending concern. Kelly moved first. Her heels clicked against the polished floor as she stepped toward us, her dress shimmering like water under moonlight. She tilted her head, her practiced smile fixed in place. "A child's fantasy," she said, her voice smooth, lilting as though speaking to soothe a tantrum. "Honestly, Helen, you've always been dramatic. Can we not spoil this day with paranoia?" Paranoia. The word cut through me like a blade. She dismissed the danger, dismissed Max's fear, dismissed the evidence as if it were nothing more than the ramblings of an overwrought grandmother. Max pressed into my side, clutching his toy car so hard the wheels dug into his palm. His little voice, trembling but fierce, whispered, "She's lying." Kelly's smile never faltered, but her eyes hardened, flat and cold. "Look at him," she said lightly, gesturing with a manicured hand. "Children imagine things. They crave attention. And Helen has been, well, let's just say she has a history of overreacting. It's understandable, given everything." Gasps rippled. A few guests exchanged glances, sympathy, doubt, discomfort. For a moment I feared her charm would work again, that her perfect composure would smother the truth. And then Jenna stood. Her chair scraped harshly against the floor, slicing the silence. She moved toward Kelly, her step steady, her face carved from fury. "Don't," Kelly said sharply, lowering her voice, but Jenna did not stop. The sound came sudden, sharp and final. A slap that cracked across Kelly's cheek like thunder splitting the night. The hall froze. Kelly staggered back, her hand flying to her face, her eyes wide with shock. The mask slipped. For the first time since she entered our lives, her practiced poise shattered, and the woman beneath was revealed. Furious, venomous, humiliated. "You wanted to hurt him," Jenna spat, her voice cutting, trembling not with fear but with rage. "You looked at that child, Grace's child, and you saw an obstacle. Don't you dare pretend this was paranoia." Kelly's mouth opened, then closed. Her chest rose and fell, her breath ragged. The perfect bride was gone. In her place stood something sharper, rawer, uglier. I lifted my hand, calling the young waiter forward. His eyes darted nervously, but he obeyed, stepping into the circle of light. "Tell them," I urged. "Tell them what you told me." He swallowed hard. "A woman gave me the note. She told me to make sure the boys' meal included shrimp. I thought it was just a preference. I didn't know about the allergy." Kelly laughed. A harsh, brittle sound. "This is ridiculous. Anyone could have written that note. Anyone could have handed it to him. Her denial rang false, too quick, too loud. Whispers stirred among the guests. Doubt spread like smoke. And then another voice cut through the tension. Kelly. All eyes turned. Chloe, Kelly's younger sister, rose from her chair. Her hands trembled as she smoothed her dress, her face pale. She looked at Kelly, then at Ethan, then at the room full of staring eyes. She asked me, Chloe whispered, her voice breaking. She asked me to pass the note to the waiter. I didn't know what it said. I swear I didn't know. Gasps erupted. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered against the floor. The sound seemed to split the evening in two, before and after. Kelly spun toward Chloe, her face twisted with fury. You stupid little. Her words were drowned in the rising murmur of the crowd. Shock turned to anger, to disgust. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some standing, some whispering too loudly to hide. The illusion of the perfect wedding collapsed. The glittering stage ripped apart. Kelly. Ethan's voice cracked, raw, disbelieving. He stepped forward, his hands trembling at his sides. Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't. She straightened, her face cold again but not composed. The mask was gone. What remained was defiance. You all think you're so clever, she hissed, her voice shaking. That boy has ruined everything. Every moment is about him. Every decision. Every memory. Grace is dead and yet she still wins. Don't you see? I just wanted a life without being haunted by her ghost. Her confession hung in the air, poisonous and undeniable. The hall erupted, shouts, accusations, gasps. An uncle demanded she be removed. A woman clutched her pearls and whispered prayers. The staff stood frozen, their trays trembling in their hands. Kelly looked around wildly, cornered animal in silk. You're all against me, she cried. Every one of you. This is a conspiracy. You think you can humiliate me, but you'll see. Her voice broke into sobs, loud and jagged, but no one believed her anymore. The mask was shattered. The perfect bride lay in ruins before us, her ambition exposed, her cruelty undeniable. And through it all Max clung to me, his small voice whispering again and again, Grandma, don't let go. I tightened my hold, my eyes never leaving Kelly's twisted face. The battle lines were drawn. This was no longer a wedding. It was a reckoning. The echo of Jenna's slap still hung in the air, a crack that had torn open every hidden seam in the room. Kelly's perfect facade lay in pieces, her tears jagged, her words venomous. Chloe trembled beside her, guilty and ashamed. Ethan stood pale, stunned, his eyes darting between his new wife and his son as if reality itself had betrayed him. I held the note high. Shall we check the security cameras? My voice, sharper than I had ever heard it, sliced through the chaos. Kelly froze. For the first time that night she looked afraid. The mask had cracked earlier, now it crumbled. Her mouth opened as if to argue, but no words came. The hall's manager, a stiff man in a tailored suit, stepped forward. He cleared his throat, uneasy but firm. There are cameras at every entrance, in the hallways and in the kitchens. If any unusual instructions were given, they will be recorded. Kelly's face drained of color. She shook her head too quickly. This is ridiculous. You people are twisting everything. It was probably Helen. Enough. I snapped louder than I had meant to. Do not put this on me. The paper was taped under my grandson's table. The note was meant for him. Guests murmured agreement, some angry, some horrified. The tide was turning. Ethan's voice, ragged, broke through. Tell me the truth, Kelly. Did you call the kitchen? Did you order shrimp for Max? For a moment she said nothing. Then her chin lifted, her eyes flashing with defiance. So what if I did? Shrimp isn't poison. You all exaggerate. The boy could have just. Ethan's voice thundered, louder than I'd ever heard it. He could have died. Do you understand that? One bite, one trace, and his throat would close. You would have led my son. The words seemed to hang in the air, impossible to take back. Kelly faltered, her lips trembling. But before she could defend herself again, I pulled the second piece of evidence from my clutch, the hidden camera I had ripped from beneath our table. I held it high for all to see, its small lens glinting under candlelight. Explain this. Gasps rippled. Guests craned their necks, eyes wide. The hall manager stepped closer, squinting. That is not ours, he admitted grimly. No cameras were installed under guest tables. Whoever placed it did so without permission. I turned to Kelly, my voice steady but merciless. You tried to K*LL him and record it. Her composure shattered completely. She lunged toward me, her hands outstretched, her voice shrieking. You're lying. You're all lying. This is a setup. You've hated me from the beginning. Security staff rushed forward, pulling her back. Her hair fell from its pins, her dress torn at the seam where she struggled. She no longer looked like a bride. She looked like a cornered predator. Check the phone logs, Jenna's voice cut through, calm but cold. Check who called the kitchen with the special order. The hall manager nodded grimly, pulling a small tablet from his pocket, fingers scrolling through records. Guests held their breath, waiting. When he spoke, his voice was iron. The order for shrimp at table 6 was placed by phone. The call came from the bride's number. The hall erupted. Gasps, shouts, accusations. An uncle demanded she be thrown out. A cousin cried, clutching her pearls. Ethan's face crumpled, disbelief and horror twisting him. Kelly, his voice cracked. Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't use your phone. Kelly's silence was louder than any confession. The guests surged with fury now. Some demanded justice, others whispered prayers. Security tightened their hold as Kelly screamed, You're all against me. You want me destroyed. This is Helen's fault. She's been poisoning you against me since day one. Her voice broke, and for the first time no one believed her. Ethan dropped his head into his hands. His broad shoulders shook. Whether from rage or grief I couldn't tell. Max clung to Jenna's arm, his face buried against her. And then, just when I thought the evening could break no further, the second shock fell. A man in a dark suit, a guest I hadn't recognized earlier, stepped forward from the crowd. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. There's something else you should know. All eyes turned to him. He cleared his throat. I'm the estate's contracted security consultant. I reviewed the hall cameras earlier today when the bride insisted on certain special arrangements. His gaze cut toward Kelly. One of those arrangements was this hidden device. He pointed at the camera in my hand. It was registered under her event account. She specifically requested surveillance of table 6. The room fell into stunned silence. Ethan's head snapped up. His voice was hoarse but clear. You set this up. You wanted to watch as my son suffered. Kelly screamed, thrashing in security's grip. It's not true. He's lying. You're all lying. But it was over. Her silence earlier had condemned her. The phone logs, the waiter's testimony, Chloe's trembling confession, the hidden camera. The pieces locked together into one undeniable truth. Kelly had not just tried to erase Grace's memory. She had tried to erase Grace's child. Guests rose, furious voices clashing. One shouted for police. Another demanded her family leave at once. The estate staff moved quickly, ushering people toward exits as the celebration dissolved into chaos. The once glittering hall now buzzed like a courtroom, judgment echoing against marble walls. I held Max close, his small arms clutching me tight. My heart ached not only with terror, but with the bitter clarity of betrayal laid bare. The mask had not only cracked, it had shattered. And beneath it lay the face of malice, one we could never unsee. The wedding ended not with vows or dancing but with shouting, broken glass, and the echo of police radios. Guests scattered like startled birds, dresses dragging through spilled wine, shoes slipping on petals meant for celebration. The candles guttered out one by one, leaving only smoke. Kelly was escorted from the hall screaming, her voice shrill, incoherent, her pearls broken and trailing across the marble floor like lost teeth. Chloe followed, sobbing, half supported by an aunt. Ethan remained rooted to the spot, his face gray, his suit wrinkled, as though time itself had abandoned him there. I held Max against my chest, his small body trembling, his toy car digging into my ribs. He had seen too much, heard too much. A child should remember balloons and cake from a wedding, not betrayal, not near death. When the last guest left, silence settled over the estate, thick and suffocating. Ethan finally moved. He walked to us, his steps slow, each one heavier than the last. He touched Max's hair, but the boy flinched, clutching Jenna instead. The rejection broke him. Ethan's hand hovered in the air, then fell uselessly to his side. He turned away, his shoulders sagging. For the first time he looked like a man stripped bare. Not the confident professional, not the charming groom, but a father who had failed to see the danger in his own home. The following days blurred into a haze of phone calls, headlines, and whispers. Newspapers printed the scandal with glee. Boston bride's wedding ends in scandal. Neighbors stared openly in grocery aisles. Strangers pointed at us in cafes. Ethan stopped answering his phone. He drove Max to school in silence, his jaw clenched, his eyes hidden behind sunglasses even on cloudy days. At night, I heard him pacing in his study, floorboards groaning under restless steps. I cooked his favorite meals, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, but the plates came back untouched. He was drowning in guilt, in shame, in the realization that the woman he had chosen had aimed her venom not at him but at his son. But where Ethan collapsed, Jenna rose. She prepared Max's school lunches herself, carefully labeling each container with "no nuts," "no shellfish" in bold letters, adding small crayon-drawn smiley faces on napkins. She waited outside his classroom after school, kneeling to listen to every detail of his day. One afternoon I found them in the park. Max was clutching the string of a kite Jenna had built with him, the paper painted in bright colors. The wind carried it high, and for the first time since the wedding, his laughter rang out. It was a thin laugh, fragile, but it was laughter all the same. At home, Jenna sat beside him during homework, patient even when his numbers came out crooked, even when his letters sprawled across the page. At night, when fever struck again, perhaps from stress, perhaps from exhaustion, she pressed cool cloths to his forehead with the same devotion Grace once had. I would stand in the doorway watching her. Sometimes my eyes blurred with tears, not just of grief for Grace, but of gratitude for Jenna. She had no obligation to love Max as fiercely as she did. She was not bound by blood, and yet she gave over and over without complaint. Ethan saw it too. His eyes lingered on her longer now, not with the blindness of before but with something heavier, complicated gratitude, aching recognition. He did not speak it, not yet, but I saw it in the way his expression softened when Jenna brushed Max's hair from his eyes, or the way his shoulders lowered when she carried plates into the kitchen. It was Jenna, not Ethan, who answered Max's midnight questions. "Grandma," he whispered one night, eyes wide in the dark. "Why did she want to hurt me?" I stroked his hair, but before I could find the words, Jenna leaned forward, her voice steady. "Because sometimes people are afraid of love they don't understand. But you are safe now. I promise you, no one will ever hurt you like that again." Max believed her. He always did. As the days turned into weeks, the house began to heal. Not through Ethan's presence, but through Jenna's persistence. She stitched small lights back into our days. Paper sparrows taped to the fridge, bedtime stories about storms that passed, warm cookies left on plates beside glasses of milk. Max began to play again. His toy car still rarely left his hand, but it no longer felt like a shield. Sometimes he placed it on the kitchen counter to help Jenna stir batter, or pushed it along the edge of the bathtub, laughing when it splashed into the water. I cooked too, but my food was heavy with worry. Jenna's food carried joy. Max could taste the difference, and so could I. Ethan remained in shadows, haunted by his blindness, but his eyes followed Jenna more often. He seemed to realize what I had known all along. It was she who kept the family standing when everyone else fell. One evening, I found Ethan in the study, staring at the silver frame of Grace and baby Max. His fingers traced the photograph, his expression torn between guilt and longing. "She would have hated me for this," he whispered. I said nothing. He already knew the truth. But when he lifted his gaze, it was not to me, but to the doorway, where Jenna stood with Max asleep in her arms. Their silhouettes overlapped, soft and steady. Ethan's eyes filled, the weight of recognition dawning. It was not Kelly who had rebuilt his life. It was not even himself. It was Jenna, the quiet anchor, the steady hand, the one who had turned despair into survival. And I knew, as surely as I knew the danger we had escaped, that the story was not finished. The fire of betrayal had nearly consumed us. But in its ashes a different truth flickered. A truth that both terrified and steadied me. The family we thought we had was gone, but another, forged of choice not chance, was taking its place. The house grew quieter in the weeks that followed, though not with peace. Silence had weight now, pressing down on every corner. Ethan spoke little. When he did, his words were clipped, almost mechanical. Pass the salt, or I'll be late. His eyes, though, told stories, guilt, shame, a constant calculation of how close he had come to losing everything. Kelly was gone. Not gradually, not with the slow erosion of love, but like a storm ripped from the sky. One day she was radiant in pearls, smiling for photographs. The next she was a curse on everyone's lips, her name spat like venom. The world had seen her mask fall, and there was no retrieving it. But her absence did not heal the house overnight. It left behind cracks, hairline fractures filled with dust and doubt. Ethan's trust in himself was gone. He walked as though on broken glass, careful, hesitant. And Max, though safe, carried shadows under his eyes. Jenna filled the void, as she always had. She rose early to prepare breakfasts, her quiet humming softening the mornings. She picked Max up from school, holding his hand through crowded hallways. In the evenings she read him stories until his eyelids fluttered closed. And yet, beneath her steady presence, something deeper stirred. I noticed it in the way she paused when Ethan entered a room, her breath catching slightly. I noticed it in Ethan too, the way his gaze lingered on her a fraction too long, softened in ways I had not seen in years. The unspoken hung between them, fragile but undeniable. It was Max who broke the silence first. One evening, the four of us sat at the dinner table. I had made stew, Jenna had baked bread. Ethan sat at the head of the table, his spoon moving mechanically, though he barely ate. Max sat beside Jenna, his red toy car parked carefully on the napkin next to his plate. He looked up suddenly, his small voice clear, unafraid. I want Aunt Jenna to be my mommy. The room froze. My spoon slipped, clattering against the bowl. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes wide, raw. Jenna's face flushed deep red, her hands trembling. Silence stretched, heavy and unbearable. Max, oblivious to the storm he had unleashed, pressed on. She makes me lunch. She reads me stories. She tucks me in. She makes me feel safe. His voice wavered slightly, but his words were certain. That's what mommies do. My heart cracked and swelled at once. Out of the mouths of children come truths adults are too cowardly to speak. Ethan's eyes filled with tears he tried to hide. He opened his mouth but no sound came. Finally he pushed his chair back, standing abruptly. His hands braced on the edge of the table, knuckles white. Max, his voice broke. You already had the best mother. Grace loved you more than life itself. I know, Max whispered. But she's gone. His small hand reached for Jenna's. And I want Aunt Jenna now. Jenna's eyes brimmed, her lips trembling. She shook her head quickly, trying to deflect. Max, sweetheart. I'm not. But Ethan cut her off, his voice hoarse, shaking. He's right. The words shocked me. For a moment I thought I'd misheard. Ethan stood rigid, his eyes locked on Jenna. You've been his mother all along. You've done everything I couldn't. You've kept him alive, kept him whole. I was blind not to see it sooner. Jenna's lips parted, her breath catching. She shook her head again, but Ethan stepped closer. His hand hovered near hers, hesitant, trembling. You saved us. Both of us. I watched, my throat tight, my eyes stinging. The past, the grief, the betrayal. It all condensed into this moment. Ethan finally stripped of denial. Jenna, caught between loyalty and forbidden longing. And Max, innocent but clear, speaking the truth we all feared. I reached across the table, my hand covering Ethan's. Happiness, I whispered, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest, isn't in dresses or parties. It isn't in facades. It's in hearts. In the people who stay when everything else falls apart. Ethan's tears finally broke free. He bowed his head, shoulders shaking, a man surrendering at last to truth. Jenna wept too, silently, as Max nestled into her side, clutching her arm as if anchoring himself to safety. Kelly was gone like a bad wind, carrying rot and malice with her. The shadows she left still clung, but they no longer ruled us. That night, I heard laughter again in the house. Fragile, hesitant, but real. Max played freely in the living room, rolling his car across the rug, racing it up Jenna's arm until she giggled. Ethan watched them, his expression filled with a complicated tenderness, grief, gratitude, and something new, still unspoken but undeniable. Later, when the house had quieted and Max was asleep, Ethan came to me. His face was drawn but steady. I was blind, Mom. I let myself be fooled by beauty, by polish, by what I thought I deserved. And all along, the person who held us together was right in front of me. His voice hardened, steady as iron. I won't let go of her. Not again. Not ever. I cried then, not with sorrow, but with a grief finally transformed into something like hope. The family we thought we had was gone. But a new one, rougher, scarred, imperfect, was being born. And this time it was forged not by illusion, but by love chosen freely. That night, long after the house fell quiet, I sat alone by the window. The moonlight spilled through the shutters, soft and pale, laying silver stripes across the floorboards. Outside, the world slept. Inside, I carried the weight of every scream, every whisper, every truth dragged into the light. The estate still haunted me. Candles flickering over shattered illusions, the note trembling in my hand, Kelly's voice cracking as her lies collapsed. Some betrayals leave scars you can name. Others seep deeper, invisible but no less cruel. This one had done both. I thought of Grace. Her laughter, her soft voice in the night, her arms wrapped around Max. She had been light, steady and warm. And though she was gone, it was her love that guided me still. When I looked under that table, when I chose to believe Max's trembling whisper, it was Grace's spirit that moved my hands. She had passed the torch without knowing, and I carried it now. But love is not the only inheritance. Betrayal leaves its legacy too. Kelly had tried to erase Grace's child, to poison not only his food but his place in this family. She wanted to cut him out like a shadow, to rewrite history with herself at the center. She failed, but the attempt itself was a wound we would never fully heal. Ethan wandered the house like a man half-ghost. Sometimes I heard him in the study, whispering apologies to no one, his voice hoarse. Sometimes he stood in Max's doorway at night, watching him sleep, his face pale with the knowledge of how close he had come to burying his son. And sometimes when Jenna walked past, his eyes lingered with a gratitude so deep it frightened me. Gratitude and something else, something tender, something dangerous. Jenna herself carried her strength like armor. She moved through each day with quiet purpose. Homework spread neatly on the table, lunches carefully packed, bedtime stories told with a calm voice that never wavered. But I knew what it cost her. At night, when the house was still, I sometimes found her in the kitchen, her hands braced against the counter, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She bore more than she should. She always had. And Max, my sweet boy. He played again, yes. He laughed, yes. But the innocence had shifted. He clung to his toy car more than ever, carrying it into bed, into school, into the bath. It was his shield, his proof of safety, the one constant in a world where mothers could vanish and stepmothers could turn into predators. One evening as I tucked him in, he whispered, "Grandma, you'll always protect me, right?" I kissed his hair, my throat tight. Always. But I also knew, protection is not a promise, it is a battle that never ends. The world beyond our walls knew our story too. The newspapers feasted on it. Headlines screamed about betrayal, scandal, attempted poisoning. Strangers debated whether Kelly had been a monster or a desperate woman driven mad by jealousy. They wrote about Ethan's shame, about Jenna's quiet devotion, about the grandmother who had exposed the plot. They turned our pain into spectacle. But they didn't know the silence afterward. They didn't know the heaviness in Ethan's sighs, the weight in Jenna's steps, the way Max clutched me tighter at night. They didn't know that betrayal does not end with exposure. It lingers sharp-edged in every pause, in every shadow. And yet there was also light. Small, fragile, but real. I saw it in the way Max's laughter returned when Jenna launched a kite into the wind. I saw it in the way Ethan finally sat at the dinner table, not to eat but simply to be there, to watch, to listen. I saw it in the way Jenna placed her hand on my shoulder after a long day, steadying me as much as herself. We were scarred, yes. But we were still here. That is the cruel irony of betrayal. It destroys illusions, but it also forces truth into the open. We learned who we were, who we could trust, who had stood in fire and who had fanned the flames. I had once believed family was blood, that loyalty was guaranteed by birth, that love was natural, unquestioned. But I know better now. Family is not blood. Family is choice. It is who stays when the house burns, Who carries water when the fire threatens to consume us? Grace had been blood by marriage, yet she became my daughter in every way. Jenna was blood to no one, yet she anchored us when we would have drifted. Kelly was bound by vows, yet she sought to destroy. I see it all now with merciless clarity. Some wounds never close. Some betrayals scar forever. But scars are proof that we survived. And survival is not enough. We must choose how to live after. That night, as the moonlight shifted across the floor, I whispered aloud the question that had burned in me since the wedding. If you were me, what would you have done? Would you have stayed silent for peace? Or risen to speak the truth? I do not know how others would answer, but I know mine. I rose. And because I did, Max is still alive. That is the weight I carry, the wound and the gift alike. So I write this not as a confession but as a witness. May my words be a candle for others in the dark. Because betrayal is never far. It hides under tables, behind practiced smiles, beneath vows spoken with trembling hands. It waits for silence. And silence is the one we *p***n. I will never give it again. We move forward, scarred, vigilant, and unafraid. Together.